Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Northwoods Kindred Podcast. I'm Bodvar, the chieftain and Goli of the Northwoods Kindred. And if you tuned in last week, which I hope you did, if not, go back and listen to that one. It was a really good program about making a case for ritual. Why do ritual? Why is it important? Why is it something that calls to us, as human beings, and something that's pretty much taken away, or we leave it to be controlled by the clergy instead of allowing it to be a personal pursuit by us individually. So I made that case, and I hope that that really hit home with some of you, and that you start performing ritual, or at least entering, putting your toe in the door on that one and start learning how to do it, because it is very rewarding to be able to just perform those rituals and get results by doing them in as traditional of a manner as we can, because traditionally our ancestors had it pretty much figured out, and then we pretty much lost it, or it was taken away from us. So making the case for ritual is very important. And I also want to point out, if you can hear that music playing, I know you can because I tuned it up, that music was written specifically for this podcast. That is our own soundtrack, written by Garvord Music in southern Norway, around Oslo. A good friend of ours. He's on our Discord. He's a really cool resource for us, especially when it comes to linguistics and all things Scandinavia. He's our contact, so he's a really nice guy, a really, really good friend, and obviously generous. He put this thing together for us, and we'll do something special for him in the future. So, hands together, give a little clap for Garvord for giving us this amazing music that we'll carry well into the future on this show. And with that, today's show is about none other than ritual. Not exclusively about ritual, but who to have a ritual to. Because we know we need to do ritual, we know it's important, but we don't always know who to ask for help or who to thank for the help that we received. So we're going to go into a little bit of it's one of the handouts. It's a free flyer that I have. So if you stick around at the end, I'll tell you how to get it. And then you can get this little Asatru. It's the Gods and Goddesses of Asatru flyer. And it's this little thing I put together just to help those of us that are new try and put some kind of order to it. Make some kind of sense out of all those names and all those jobs and all those deities that we have now. When you're used to one, it's easy. You just put your hands together and you ask God or whatever for the help that you need, and you thank him for the help that you got, and it's real simple and dumbed down. But we as pagans got to do our homework, and we got to learn who's the god of this, who's the god of that, who's the goddess of this, who do I pray to, who do I ask for this kind of help, who do I reward and thank for the help that I received. So that being the pagan way or the heathen way, it's probably in any of our best interests to actually learn we want to venerate in this different circumstances. So I've made a little collection here of gods and goddesses and a little introduction, and I'm making this available for you, free to download, so you can keep this in your pocket or in your ritual kit, and it'll help you out. So if something good happens or you need some help, you want to make an offering to one of these gods and enlist their support in one of your endeavors, this might help you figure out which one. Now, barring that, I would highly recommend, it was in my podcast number 2 about my book collection, I highly recommend this particular book, the Encyclopedia in Norse and Germanic Folklore, Mythology, and Magic. And this really goes detailed. It's an encyclopedia, and it goes detailed, by name, and it gives a lot more information than my little flyer. But barring anything else, this is a good start. It's a good place to go to for just a little bit of information if you need it. So a lot of what I'm going to be doing here is I'm just going to be reading the flyer. I'm going to give it all to you right here verbally, but then I'm going to tell you where you can download it, print it off, put it in your ritual kit or in your pocket, and have it available to you for whenever you need it. So the cover's traditional, as the other 2 flyers that I pointed you to. And when I give you a link to this one, you can go download this. The other ones are there too. Just a little pamphlet like this that's a explanation of how to do bloat. That's in there. And then a little bit of why and the mechanics of it, like a 1, 2, 3 process that you can master eventually and then throw the paper away. And then there's another one on the frequently asked questions of Asatru. So if you're new to the path and you don't really know how to answer some of these questions, or you might have some questions yourself, those will be in that other flyer. So now we'll have 3 of them there for you to download for free. Print them off, give them to your friends and family, leave them at the church, put them on the bulletin board at the grocery store. I'm good with any of that. And then, of course, they all have a QR code on the back that will take you to our YouTube so that you can either watch these podcasts, watch our videos, learn how to do this stuff, see a bloat in action, see a kindred in action. All of that stuff is there for you to enjoy. So let's, without further ado, kick it and read the introduction to the flyer. The purpose of this leaflet is to introduce you to some of the primary roles of the gods and goddesses of the Asatru faith. This information is by no means all-encompassing description of the many roles that our gods play in our daily lives. Consider this a quick reference of the major attributes that we associate with some of the more widely known deities of our way. For the sake of simplicity, I have not distinguished between the Aesir and the Vanir. We honor them the same, and the subtle differences are a topic for a much more detailed conversation. And I guess in some ways there are some Jotun in here too, because I do cover at the very least Loki, Odin, Heimdall, and Mimir. And we all know that they are all giant kin. Like I said, this is not all-encompassing, so there are some, especially on the goddesses side, I'm lacking. Like I've only got so much space. So I covered the majority of the questions that I get asked about these people and that. I realized that some of the important gods and goddesses or Jotun are not in here. Skadi's not in here. Don't take it as a slight, just as a basic. Okay, there's so many more ways we could go with this, and so many more gods and goddesses and creatures that could be venerated for different topics. I just can't cram them all into one little leaflet, at least not at a font that you'd be able to read. So I'm just going to dive right into it. We're going to start with the Asenir, in the Asenir are the goddesses. So you have the Aesir and the Asenir, and you have the gods and the goddesses. Those terms will be used a lot as you progress through Asatru. You are going to hear Aesir and Asenir. There are the Aesir as an entire race of gods. The Vanir are another race of gods. I don't distinguish between them. To me, they are the Aesir and the Asenir, which being the gods and the goddesses of either pantheon, and including some Jotun. And I kind of beat that one to death, but I just want to make the point that we're not separating them here. We're just going to talk about them, who they are, and what good they do for us as mortal beings. So the first one will be Freya. Freya, she is the beautiful daughter of Njord, the Aesir's fertility goddess and the patroness of magic, working Sidre. Her dwelling in Asgard is called Folkvengr, and that is where she welcomes half of the warriors slain in battle. Freya is the queen of the Valkyries, and is the origin of the word Frau, as in lady or mistress. She was originally a goddess of the Vanir, but is closely associated with both races of the gods. So when Freya and her brother Frey came to the company of the Aesir, they were only children. They came when Njord was exchanged to the Aesir after the Aesir-Vanir War. And there's a whole story surrounding that. But when Frey and Freya came over, we assume, you got to understand that the stories aren't always linear, but we assume that Frey and Freya were children because Odin gives Frey a tooth fee when he cuts his first tooth. So we got to assume that they're not at war, and that's not the enemy's kids anymore. When he cut his first tooth, and he gave him Vanaheim, for which he rules that land as an adult. And of course there are other stories surrounding Frey, who is also one of the most beloved of all the Aesir and the Vanir of the gods. So they came to the company of the Aesir as children, or at least that's kind of how it's spelled out, even though everything isn't really chronological the way you would expect. Not sure. I don't think time and space exist for them at the same way that it exists for us. But either way, Freya is one of our prime deities on the female side, much beloved, and my personal matron. So there's a whole lot more to know about Freya, and this is only just scratching the surface, but it'll get you started on what she is and who she is, so you can do more research if you were going to venerate her in a ritual. Frigga, not the same. And the reason that we know that Freya and Frigga are not the same, or we assume they're not the same person, because there's a lot of speculation that the names got a little confused because they are similar. Freya's husband was Odd, who ran off, and Frigga's husband is Odin. Really close, really similar. We really don't know because there are a lot of documents missing over time. But the one thing we can rely on is that Freya and Frigga were both assaulted separately in the Lokasena when Loki got drunk and started trashing everybody in Ager's Hall. So we assume, based on the way that the communication was going, that each individual assault was on an individual god or goddess separate from one another. So Frigga, she is Odin's wife and Njord's sister. Which distinguishes her separate from Njord's children. Which also makes her, what? A Vanner god. She has clairvoyant powers. However, she carefully guards these secrets of the future very tightly. Frigg's hall in Asgard is called Fensalar, and it is located in Gladsheim. The weekday of Friday was originally named after her, or possibly Freya, which is one of those things that confuses, Frigga, Freya, Frau, Friday. You can see how it all kind of gets smeared together, but we do know from various different stories and different collections, bits and pieces, that Frigga is the queen mother, the wife of Odin, and clairvoyant. Freya is the sister to Frey, the daughter of Njord, and the queen of the Valkyries, and also of seed magic. Gethin, the goddess of agriculture and the patroness of the virgin. She looks after all unmarried women when they die. So if a bachelorette kicks the bucket, she's going to be hanging out with Gethin, and she's going to, I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know how that works, but she is the patroness for sure of unmarried women, of the young miss. Hulda, this is a tricky one. Hulda, the name that Frigga was given when the Christians in powerful offices outlawed worshipping her. Heathens that patronized Frigga gave her this name to keep from being tortured by Christians. So if you think you got it bad when you're wearing your hammer and somebody says a bad name to you, at least you weren't being tortured by Christians for honoring the goddess Frigga in your home. So they changed her name to Hulda, and they did that. They would just discuss Hulda as if it were a person, in which case they could venerate Hulda as an ancestor, because there was a point during these transitional period here where they didn't care if you venerated the land spirits or your ancestors or the elves. They cared about named gods and goddesses that were separate from Jehovah or God or Jesus or however they referred to that particular deity at the time. But they only cared really about outlawing named gods and goddesses. So in the case of Frigga being so beloved by the people, they decided to just change her name to Hulda and honor her anyway, to keep from being tortured by the masochistic Christians of the day. Iduna, or Idun. Iduna, she is the wife of Bragi and the keeper of the golden apples of youth. She was given this responsibility by Odin to keep the gods youthful forever. The Norns ensure that she may only pick the apples. So what that means is that she's the only one that can pick the apple. If Odin or Frigga or Freya or Thor go try to pick the apples off of Iduna's tree, they wither and die. Only she can pick those apples into her basket and deliver them to the gods so that they may consume them and stay young. That is her. I don't know if you want to call it a blessing or a curse, but she can't go too far because they're going to want her back in Asgard, picking them apples and serving them up. Nanna. Nanna is the wife of Balder and the mother of Forseti. She accompanied him to Hel, where they both wait for his return at Ragnarok. She could not bear to live in Asgard without her husband. Beautiful Balder. And that's pretty much the nuts and bolts of it right there. Nanna was a very faithful companion, a faithful wife, and it's interesting too because Nanna accompanied her beloved to Helheim to wait out the final day, whereas Sigyn also, which I don't have her in here, but as the wife of Loki, also accompanied him through his torment, through his imprisonment. So there's a theme being formed where the wives of these deities are fiercely loyal up to and include their own lives, which might actually reflect back to the point where back in the old Viking days when a slave might offer up their own life to accompany their master, or possibly a woman accompanying her husband into the next realm. I don't think that was super common, but it did happen. It was a part of the history, and it's echoed in the lore with stories like that. Sif is the wife of Thor, and together they live in Blidskirnir, in the land of Thrudvang. She has long golden hair that was forged by the dwarf Brock when Loki cut hers off. A whole different story. Check that out. Because it was a catalyst for a whole lot of really good and bad things to happen in the realm of the gods. She is also the mother of Ullr from her previous marriage. And Sif's hair is a kenning for gold, which when Loki cut off her hair and had it forged by Brock forged it out of pure gold. So Sif's hair is a kenning for gold, and it is also made out of gold. So when Brock fastened it, he fashioned this magic hair so special that as soon as she put it on, it was steadfast to her head and started to grow along like her own hair. It was even finer and more golden than her original hair. So it made Thor quite happy to see his wife not being bald again due to the pranks of Loki. The Norns. The Norns, or Norna, have a role that cannot be influenced or controlled by men or gods. Not even Odin can influence their decision. Not even Freya with her foresight can alter the web that they weave. They weave the fates of all men and gods. They also daily sprinkle the world tree Yggdrasil with the life-sustaining nectar. Where exactly that nectar comes from changes from story to story, but that's the general consensus, is that the Norns live at the base of the world tree, and they sprinkle that tree with the water from the well to feed it and give it life, while at the same time simultaneously weaving your fate, my fate, and even that of the gods. So to break that down a little bit farther with the Norns, let's talk about Skald. She is the youngest of the three Norns. She knows the future of all gods and men alike. And there are tales of her being a little bit picked on by the other Norns, by the other two Norns, Urd and Verdandi. They pick on Skald a little bit because she's the youngest and a little bit more naive, but she has her own tricks up her sleeve. And one of those tricks is kind of told in the story of Norna Gest, who was born, the Norns visited him at birth, and Urd and Verdandi foretold this great fantastical future. They ragged on Skald a little bit, and she said, okay, well, he can have his fantastic future as he wants, but he will only live as long as that candle until that candle burns out, or something like that. So, real quick, Verdandi scoops up the candle, puts the flame out, gives it to his mom, and says, keep it safe forever. So she keeps it safe until he's a grown man. And it's said that Nornagest served with Ragnar Lothbrok, and he fought with Sigurd the Dragon Slayer, and all kinds of fantastic stories throughout the Viking Age, until such time as he converted to Christianity, did not believe in the Norns or the old ways anymore, lit the candle, it burned down, and he fell dead in excess of 300 years old. All because of a curse, because they were picking on Skald. Urd is the oldest of the three Norns, and she knows the past. And I don't know what else to say about that. She knows the past. That's her job. Verdandi and Skald are weaving the future and the present, and Urd is just shredding them and tearing them up. Also synonymous with Urd's well, which would be Urd's well would be the well of the past, and it would have some connotation saying, or some sort of a relation to the well of memory, the well of the spirit of the folk, and the memory, the cultural memory of the people themselves. And then Verdandi, the middle of the three Norns, she knows the events as they are unfolding. So her job is to know what is happening and control that. Now the Norns are older than the gods, apparently. There is no creation myth around them being, and they have foresight. They not only know the future, they partially create it, and the gods or the men, no one can bribe them, no one can manipulate them. They are independent of all, and they just do their own thing. They are a powerful force of creation and destruction. And that's about the end of the passage on the Asenir. And I told you it's incomplete, but it'll get you going. It'll get you started, all right? And then we'll talk about the gods, the Asir. Before I do that, I really want to encourage that you pick up these kind of books, and you pick up the story books, and you pick up the poetic books, and these other ones. If you don't know what books to pick up, bounce back a couple episodes. Episode 2 is all about the books. It's a full hour of me just going through books, giving a brief description of what's in the book or what kind of book it is, and then giving you a lot of really good information that you can use to figure out which of those books fit your needs, and also give you the insurance that you can buy it and know that you're going to get a quality piece of literature that's going to help move the needle on your practice. So I do encourage you to go a lot farther than what this flyer has to offer. So when we talk about the gods, the Asir, I'm also including, there are some Jotun, or at least Jotun kin, and there are Vanir mixed and mingled in here. I'm not going to distinguish between one or the other. They are the gods, period. Balder, the son of Odin and Frigg. He has a son Forseti with his wife Nanna. His hall is called Breidablik. He is loved by all living creatures. He was murdered by his brother Blind Hoder as he was tricked by Loki, who was jealous that everyone loved Balder. So Frigga had a dream, and in that dream, with her clairvoyant powers, she saw that Balder was going to die, her beloved son. So Odin mounted on Sleipnir and hauled ass down to hell to basically interrogate Hela and say, what's going on? What's going on with Balder? So he tried to be tricky, but she figured out who it was and clammed up. And so the only information he could get was that she was going to, welcome him into her hall, and no more information than that. So Odin heads back home to report his findings. So Frigga says, I will extract an oath from all creatures in all 9 worlds. So Frigga heads out on her own little quest, and she gets an oath from all creatures not to harm Balder, except the one little creature that she didn't bother with was the harmless little mistletoe that was hanging out over in the corner. Well, eventually, with interrogation and a little spying and listening in on other people's conversations, Loki figured that out. So as Balder was untouched by anything, he could not be harmed by man or weapons or beast. They were making a sport of it, having a good little game. Let's throw some darts, let's shoot some arrows, let's stab him, let's have some fun. Balder can't die no more. But Loki and Loki alone found out that mistletoe was the only thing that had not oathed to save Balder. So he grabbed that piece of mistletoe, he fashioned an arrow out of it, he put it in the hands of Blind Hoder, and he's like, Hoder, why are you not enjoying the fun? He's like, well, I can't really see, so there's not really much I can do. And he's like, well, I'll guide you, I'll help you. So he helps Hoder, and he points the arrow, and he launches it, and he kills Balder, and everybody freaks out. So Balder is now dead. So they go back down, and they talk to Hel, and they're like, what do we got to do to get Balder back? And she's like, reluctantly, fine. If you can get every creature in existence to cry for Balder, then I'll let him go. So, of course, they go back around to all those that oath to not hurt him, and they try to get every creature in existence to cry for Balder so he can be released from Helheim. But Loki, once again, not only did he create the problem, but he exacerbated it, in which case he would not cry. He dressed as an old lady or an old giantess, refused to cry, so Hela, Loki's daughter, would not release Balder from her grasp. And there he sits, waiting for the final day. That's why the flyer says he's beloved by all living creatures. So that one little line has a complete story that it tells. So I can't emphasize enough. This will help you find which god or goddess you want to venerate. But do the work. Do the homework. Search Google or DuckDuckGo it and find out a little bit more information. and just kind of cement that into your brain, one god or goddess at a time. The next god we'll cover is Bragi. Bragi, the son of Odin and Gunnlod. He is the god of poetry. He is married to the goddess Iduna, and he is the patron of skalds. And then, depending on the source, Bragi's name was Bragi Boddason, and he was a living skald who is in high demand amongst all the kings and the noblemen around the Scandinavian countries. As he traveled, earned great fame and renown for himself. So when he passed, he became a person who is venerated by all and a demigod in that respect. As the son of Odin and Gunnlod, maybe that was one of Odin's, one of the times when Odin was walking the earth as a man. We really don't know, but so there is a lot of evidence that Bragi was potentially a human being. But then again, if you read the Yngling saga, Odin was also a king, a migrating king in the north, and died a straw death on his bed from old age. Forseti. Forseti is the son of Balder and Nanna. He solves problems when the gods have a dispute and presides over their thing. His hall is called Glitnir, and he is the patron of courts and laws. So if you need to settle a dispute, it would probably be this would be a good opportunity to make an offering to Forseti to help settle the dispute. It is said that no matter how complicated or one-sided the dispute, that Forseti can always settle it to the delight of both parties. And you can imagine how complicated that is. That is why he sits on the high seat when the gods have their thing, or when the gods have a dispute that needs to be settled. Forseti is the judge and jury. Frey. Frey is the son of Njord and the brother to Freya. He is the god of fertility and growth. He lives with his wife, the giantess Gerda, in Alfheim. And it's an amazing story about how Frey traded his beloved flaming sword in order to woo Gerda and bring her home to be his wife. It's a story I encourage you to look up and read. It's beyond the scope of this podcast, but it is an amazing story. Frey was most beloved among the North folk. It is said that he was the king, and he sat on the high seat at the temple at Uppsala. And Frey was so beloved that he was almost always invoked for oaths in the name of, when they swear an oath, instead of so be it or amen, they said, so help me Frey, Njord, and the Almighty As. Almighty As being Odin himself. Heimdall. Heimdall is the patron of the Northwoods kindred. Heimdall is the teacher of men. So he is the son of Odin and 9 giantesses, wave giantesses to be precise. He is the guardian of the Bifrost Bridge. He will sound the Gjallarhorn when the giants gather for Ragnarok. He is also known as the brightest of the gods. Heimdall, when he was born, was gifted with the amazing sight and hearing and smell. It is said that he can hear the grass grow. The grasses grow in 9 worlds. And when Loki's army of the undead and the Jotun gather to meet the gods on the Ida Plain, they must cross the Bifrost. And when that happens, Heimdall will blast the Gjallarhorn and signal to all 9 worlds that the final battle is ready to begin. But Heimdall has another persona, and that is of Rig. And Rig is the name that Heimdall used when he roamed the earth and sired the 3 classes of men. He also gave knowledge of the runes to mankind by passing it directly to one of his children. So, as the story goes, Heimdall moved through the land of men, and he laid between husband and wife for 3 nights, and then he left, and they would have the baby, and the baby would be Thrall, Carl, and Jarl. So you got the 3 classes of men, and it's described very thoroughly who these classes of men were and what their role in society would be. So not only did he sire them, he also trained them and taught them how to fill their roles. So he taught mankind how to use tools, how to use fire, how to cook, how to craft, how to do all the things that we take for granted, which is one of the reasons why not only is crafting important to this path, being able to use your hands and create things, because that was a gift from Heimdall, but it's a very It's a very sacred pastime here at the Northwoods Kindred. We do craft a lot. We do craft gatherings. Like the whole gathering is centered around building something cool, like a pack basket or our quest hoods or the various different cool things that we do here. All centered on craft, because if we centered on craft, then we can honor our patron, Heimdall. And the last thing that Heimdall did for us was he gave mankind the runes. Now, they do say, and everybody seems to credit Odin. Odin discovered the runes, but Odin did not give the runes to men. The runes were given to men by Heimdall. And also, Heimdall's got a little bit of a sense of humor, too, because he's the one that convinced Thor to dress up like a woman to go get his hammer back when he needed to go convince Thrym he was Freya and would marry him according to whatever the deal was they had going on. So that was Heimdall's little practical joke against Thor. It made Thor dress up like a little girl and go rolling with Loki down to Giantheim to get hitched to get his beloved Mjolnir back. So again, another fantastic story. I encourage you to read it. So speaking on that, let's talk about Loki. I know you guys were waiting for that one. I did include Loki. I don't venerate Loki, but Loki is a very important figure in the Norse pantheon, so he needs to be included because I understand a lot of y'all do. Now, Loki is the husband of Sigyn. Together they have a son named Narvi. The gods killed Narvi. A little bit of a story behind even the death, but read that one too. And used his guts to bind Loki to a stone. He is a cunning trickster that won some of the most precious items in Asgard. He is the father of the Fenris wolf, the world serpent Jomagandr, and the giantess Hela, or Hel. He is the foster brother to Odin, or some would say a blood brother, but technically it was referred to as foster brother. And his offspring will destroy the world and the gods at Ragnarok, the doom of the gods. That is his lot. That is what the Norns decreed for Loki, that he would be the bad guy in that event. And I'm not sure he's too happy about it, but that's his cards. Those are the cards he was dealt. The next god we'll talk about is Mimer, who is a giant. He is the wisest of all beings. The Vanir gods chopped off his head, so Odin charmed it and put it in a well. Mimer's well is the well of knowledge, and the cost of one drink for Odin was his eye. Now, I think that the reason that Odin had to pay with an eye is because Mimer's probably mad at him. So if you really dig into it, Mimer's sister is Odin's mother. Okay? And so that makes him Odin's uncle. And after the Aesir-Vanir War, they traded Honor and Mimir to the Vanir. Well, Honor was beloved and gorgeous, but he wasn't that smart. But anytime that he would have to make a decision, he would go refer to Mimir. Well, the Vanir kind of got sick of his stupidity, and rather than kill him because he was Odin's brother, they decided to kill Mimer. I don't know why it makes it any better if he's his uncle, but apparently that didn't breach whatever contract they had. So they kill Mimir, and they send the head back to Odin, and they're like, okay, this is for sending us an idiot and his council. Here's his council. Now we got your idiot. And so Odin charmed the head and put it in the well so that he can continue to use that knowledge and converse with Mimir. I'm not sure Mimir likes his new situation very much, so he was like, oh, you want to drink from my well and get some skills? All right, I need your eye, bud. you need to suffer along with me. So I think that that's really a little bit more of how it went. And I know I sound kind of cavalier about this, that I'm joking and like I sound disrespectful to the gods, but I don't believe that they get disrespected in that like that. I think that the fact that we enjoy the stories and we find a little humor in them and we can see through just the black and white on the pages, but we can kind of see the story and the personality behind it. I think there's value in that. So I wouldn't be too concerned about hurting their feelings and then incurring the wrath of Odin because you giggled at Mimir's situation. I don't think that that's a problem. Our gods are not the Christian gods. They are not wrathful in that respect. Look at just how many times and how much damage Loki had to do before he was ever punished. With the exception of, getting his lips sewn together and things like that. There were small punishments, but not like you would expect for some of that damage that was done. So after Mimir, let's go to the boss. Let's talk about Odin. Odin is the father of the gods who together with his brother Vali and Ve created the world from the flesh and bones of the giant Ymir. He is married to Freya and lives in Gladsheim. He claims half of the battle dead for his army in Valhalla, or Valhall. He has 2 ravens, Hugin and Munin, meaning thought and memory, and 2 wolves, Freki and Jerry. So a little bit about Odin, which you probably know a fair amount about Odin already. But Odin, Vili, and Ve created the man and woman, Ask and Embla, younger, and their young career. They were young gods at that time, and they were experimenting with their powers. And they did a pretty good job, We turned out okay, I think. After killing the brutal giant Ymir, so they wouldn't create any more giants. Now, it's said that Odin claims half the battle, or half the dead, for his army in Valhall. And there's a lot of people who are like, oh, well, I mean, if you're a lawyer, you're fighting battles. If you're fighting mental problems, you're fighting battles. If you're doing this other thing, you're fighting battles. But it's fairly specific in the Yngling saga, when Odin was the king of the north, a migrating king. When he dies a straw death, he marks himself with a spear, which is to say he stabs himself, in the chest with a spear, and he proclaims that he is going to Godsheim, and where he will greet all men slain by weapons. By men, he means men of mankind, slain by weapons, so battle dead, or those that died in some form of a combat. You can interpret that however you want. I interpret that as men slain by weapons, and even though I have fought my entire adult life as a U.S. Marine, and now I am retired, there's very little chance, I think, that I will end up in the Valhall, because I will most likely not be slain by weapons. I will most likely die of some pedestrian garbage like a heart attack or a coronary artery disease or whatever. But it will not be from a sword or a gun or a knife unless I am extremely unlucky. So I will probably not end up in Valhall, and you probably won't either, unless you are in combat arms and you engage in martial combat on the regular. And after Odin, we're going to talk about his son, the mighty, mighty Thor. The strongest of the gods. Actually, not his son is stronger. There's a really cool story about that when he slays the giant Ranganir and gets pinned under his leg, and his son lifts the leg up and lets him out. Come on, Dad. And his son was only a couple of days old at that particular point in time. So Thor is not the strongest of the gods. But for all the adult gods, I suppose he is. The strongest of the gods, he is the son of Odin and Earth, or Jord, and is married to Sif. He is the protector of the common man. He carries the hammer Mjolnir that always returns to his hand when thrown. He has a pair of iron gloves or gauntlets and a belt that doubles his strength when it's tightened. Where have we seen that before? Where can you tighten a belt and gain more strength? So I would assume it's something along the lines of a weightlifting belt. When you tighten that weightlifting belt, you can get just a little bit more oomph because you can push a little bit harder. Kind of seems like maybe that was something they already knew back in the day, right? They had a big old leather belt. You tighten that sucker up and you can pick up an even bigger rock and chuck it at your enemy. So it's likely that has a little nugget of truth in the way that men outfitted themselves for battle to gain a little bit more strength. So the gauntlets are there to catch Mjolnir when he chucks it, because if it can destroy a mountain, it'll probably break his hand. All right, these next 2 gods are a little less known. Their stories are a little bit more lost in history. We know they were beloved, and we know that they were venerated because there are place names after at least one of them. But let's talk about Tyr, my patron, because I was a professional Marine for quite some time. The greatest warrior in all the worlds. He is the god of war, honor, and justice. He is the patron of the all-thing and of oaths. He sacrificed his hand in order to allow the gods to bind the Fenris wolf. And that's a whole lot of information crammed into almost nothing. What happened was the Fenris wolf was Tyr's charge. He was the one who fed him and played with him and petted him and brushed him and did all that stuff. Tyr and Fenris were, for all intents and purposes, they were bros. And then the gods got scared because the wolf got big. There's elements of the story that don't quite sit right. The fact that they went through the hassle of chaining up the wolf instead of befriending it and treating it kindly and making an ally out of it while probably not the best tactic for as smart as the gods are supposed to be, it definitely echoes in the world we live in today. Think of the combat we have with someone on the internet or on a different platform who does something that can be perceived as mildly insensitive to any marginalized community, whether they even know it's insensitive or not. We don't make them our allies. We don't educate them. We berate them. We trash them, and we drive them into the arms of our enemies because we have no tolerance for that, and we get scared. And when I say we, I mean the people on the internet who trash people for no reason. I try my hardest to stay away from that sort of engagements because I've never seen it work out in anyone's favor. Some people might feel really good. Yeah, we got that guy. We got that racist and we chased him out of here. And that guy's like, I don't know what I did wrong. I just did this thing that was in the book. I didn't know the book was racist. I got it at Barnes & Noble. There's a lot of that. And I think we should probably be a little bit more empathetic to our fellow pagans and educate before we berate and kick them out of our community, because in a lot of cases it's done out of ignorance. It's not done out of maliciousness. So there's a lesson there in that story with Tyr. I encourage you to read it and pick it apart and learn the little things about how what was good and what was bad about that event. The fact that Tyr was the only one that had the brass balls to stand up and be like, I'll take the hit. This is my boy. I know I'm going to lose my hand. I know I'm going to be sacrificing, essentially half of my skill if I'm a sword god and I can fight with both hands, with one gone. What are you going to do? So knowing the cost, he still stood up and took the hit. Just like our military men and women today, they know the potential. There's potential there to lose their lives, to make the ultimate sacrifice, but they still stand up and do it, which is why Tyr would be the patron of the warriors. And the last we will talk about is, well, not the last. Is he the last? Let me see where we're at. Yes, that is the last. So the last god that we're going to talk about is Ul, or Uller. Now, we know that Uller was very much beloved. There are a lot of place names in and around Scandinavia, around the Northlands, named with Uller in elements of their name. But we don't know much about him. Perhaps it was one of those things where it was so common, they forgot to write it down. So Ul, the god of hunting and winter. He is the son of Sif with her first husband. His weapon is the bow and arrow. He often wanders the mountains hunting on his snowshoes. His home is called Italy, or Udales, which, oddly enough, we have named our homestead Italy. We're in the mountains. We have snow. We hunt with bows. We travel on skis. It all just kind of seems to fit really well. Now, in some sagas and some little bits of lore here and there, you may see that Uller, or Ul, is the only other one who's allowed or capable to sit on Lidshelf on Odin's throne, where he can see all things in all of the worlds. So what we have now, if you think about it, we have Heimdall, who can see it naturally. We have Odin, who sits on his throne and can see it. And when he takes his leave, Uller fills in for him and sits on his high seat, which might lead you down the road that Uller was the previous god before Odin took the throne. There's a lot of little thought games you can play with that, and if you come up with some really cool theories, then I'd love to hear them. But there's talk that Uller could have been the original Sky Father, and Tyr as well, or potentially even one and the same. So we really don't know. There's not a lot of information. A lot of the information we do have has been lost over time, and we make do with what we have the best as we can. So this flyer is going to be available to you just right down here in the show notes. Like if you're on YouTube right now, there's a link to my website where you can pick this up. If you are on Anchor or Spotify, I will put a link right down in the show notes that will take you straight to my website where you can download this and the other two, and you'll have these 3 little pamphlets that you can keep with your ritual gear. You can study them with your kindred. Again, they're not a be-all, end-all for everything, but they're a good little reference that'll get you going, and it's like, hey, if I got a problem, who do I go to? I read through this. Okay, Forseti is the one I need to speak to on this one. And then you get on the internet or get yourself a really good knowledgeable book like this. You look him up, you read about him a little bit more, and then you can go into Bloat with a clear mind and a really good vision of who you're talking to and what you need from them, or what you want to, how you want to venerate them for the help that you received if you didn't ask for it, but you got it anyway. So a key takeaway with this is I want you to understand I was kind of a little bit cavalier with the way that I talked about the gods and their deeds and, kind of making a little jest here and there. I want you to understand that we can do that. We don't have to fear them like our Christian counterparts. We left that world behind when we left Christianity, and we don't have to play the game where our gods are this powerful, vindictive, cruel thing that we must honor 100% of the time without ever wavering or without ever faltering. If we look at our gods as our friends, as our family, as our grandfather, you can joke with your grandfather, but you still talk to him respectfully, and you have conversations, but it doesn't mean you can't have laughter and fun times and a little jest at the same time. So if we look at our gods as our ancestors, I think that you'll find that this path is a lot more rewarding. But if you just spend your time here in front of a plethora of gods and goddesses, figuratively on your knees in fear of the wrath of them, you'll never fully be able to embrace what we have and be able to live life to its fullest. If you fear that the freedom of choice and the humor and the intellect and the quick-wittedness that they gave us is somehow wrong to use, you are allowed to use the gifts that they gave you. In fact, if you want to really offend the gods, don't use them, because all that effort that they put into creating mankind and training it and schooling it up and fathering the races, the classes of men, and making us what we are today, to not use those gifts is about the biggest insult. So don't feel too scared or cautious about just having a little joke at their expense. Loki did it, and it took a long time before he was ever punished, and I don't think we could ever compete with the level of damage and destruction that he did. So don't sweat the small shit. Our gods are forgiving, they are compassionate, they are flawed just like us, and they are there to help us, and they are there to listen to us and guide us so that we can learn and live by their example, but never to just have unwarranted fear of their wrath. It is unreasonable. It is very much a Christian concept, and it's not one that we should embrace. It's not one that we do embrace. Learn your gods as your friends. Embrace them as such. Don't be afraid to have fun with them, and I will see you guys on the next one. I'm Bodvar, the chieftain and Gothi of the Northwoods Kindred, and I wish you have a fantastic week, and I'll see you back here next Friday for the next episode of the Northwoods Kindred Podcast. Thor Vigi, my friends.